Welcome to this explainer on the Central African Republic. Now, the name sounds simple enough, but its history is just this incredibly complex and tangled story of exploitation and conflict. So today, we're going to try to unravel that history and really connect the dots from its ancient roots all the way to its struggles today.
I mean, just look at where it is. It's located literally at the very heart of the African continent. And the story of this nation, well, it's a story of ancient peoples, of absolutely brutal extraction by outside forces, and a relentless and often really tragic struggle just to find some stability.
To really understand the challenges the country faces today, we have to go back, way back. Long before any colonial borders were ever drawn on a map, this land had a deep and incredibly rich history of its own. The depth of civilization here is just staggering. We're talking about a Neolithic revolution 12,000 years ago. People were building incredible stone megaliths, they mastered ironworking, and they developed these complex societies built on farming and trade. For millennia, this was a land of flourishing cultures, which, honestly, makes what happened next all the more tragic. Because starting in the 16th century, powerful and violent forces arrived from the outside, and they would completely and forever change the region's path, setting in motion this pattern of exploitation that you could argue echoes right through to this day. First, it was slave traders who raided communities for centuries. Then, in the late 19th century, the European colonial powers showed up as part of the scramble for Africa. France eventually won out, setting up a post at Bangui and naming their new territory Ubangi Shari. And this marked the beginning of a truly devastating period.
So, how did France pay for its new colony? Well, they didn't. They basically outsourced the whole operation using this brutal system of concessionary companies. These were private firms that were given free rein over enormous chunks of land. Their only goal? Profit. And they extracted it at an unbelievable human cost.
The abuses were just unimaginable. People were forced into brutal labor, building railways or harvesting rubber until they literally died from exhaustion and disease. The French writer André Guitide was the one who exposed these atrocities to the world. He described a terror so profound that locals would flee deep into the forest at the mere mention of a white man's name. But people didn't take this brutality lying down. In 1928, it sparked the Congo-Wara Rebellion, a massive uprising of over 350,000 people. It might have been the largest anti-colonial rebellion in all of Africa between the two world wars.
Okay, so after World War II, a wave of independence sweeps across the continent, and on August 13, 1960, the Central African Republic is officially born. But freedom from colonial rule, tragically, did not mean peace was on the horizon.
Nope. Instead of stability, independence really just ushered in an age of strong men. First up was David Dacko, who pretty quickly created a one-party state. He was soon overthrown by his cousin, Jean Bedel Bokassa, whose reign became infamous for its sheer brutality and his absolutely bizarre decision to crown himself emperor.
The fall of Bokassa didn't end the cycle of violence. In fact, you could say it set a really dangerous precedent. It kicked off this decades-long pattern of coups and political instability that would come to define the country's modern history.
I mean, this slide really says it all. It was just a revolving door of power. It was almost never transferred peacefully, it was just taken by force. And with every single coup, ethnic divisions got deeper, trust was destroyed, and the state itself was just hollowed out.
Even a brief return to democracy in the 1990s couldn't break the cycle. President Patasse won the elections, sure, but his rule was plagued by ethnic favoritism and paranoia. He faced multiple mutinies, he had to have UN peacekeepers just to stay in power, and ultimately, you guessed it, he was overthrown in yet another military coup.
So all of this long history of weak government, of ethnic tension, of violent power grabs, it was a powder keg. And in 2012, that powder keg finally exploded into a full-scale, devastating civil war that, in a lot of ways, is still going on today. The conflict pretty quickly broke down along two main lines. On one side, you had the Seleka, a coalition of mostly Muslim rebel groups from the north who seized the capital. On the other side were the anti-Balaka, who are mostly Christian and animist self-defense militias that rose up to fight them. Both sides committed horrific atrocities, and the country was plunged into this brutal cycle of sectarian violence.
And the result of all this was the complete collapse of the state. Today, the central government has very little authority outside the capital city, In fact, some estimates suggest that various armed groups now control a staggering 60% or even more of the entire country.
Now, that Seleka coalition officially disbanded, but its fighters just splintered off into new militias, often drawn along ethnic lines. They've carved out these personal fiefdoms, and they controlled the trade in things like diamonds, gold, and timber. It's like a dark, modern echo of that old colonial concessionary system, only this time it's run by warlords.
And that pretty much brings us to today. Despite having elections, the government of President Touadéra is really propped up by thousands of UN peacekeepers and, pretty controversially, Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group. Numerous peace deals and ceasefires have been signed, but the fighting and the instability just grind on, fueled by that competition over resources and these really deep-seated grievances.
So when you step back and you look at the whole picture, from those colonial concession companies to the modern warlords, you see the exact same tragic pattern playing out, a loop of external exploitation followed by internal conflict. It raises a really crucial and difficult question for the country's future.
And that's our quick history of the Central African Republic. Its story of conflict, which was so heavily shaped by colonial-era extraction, has parallels across the continent. To see how another nation was forged by these very similar forces, you should go watch our explainer on the Democratic Republic of Congo.
If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to understand the world a little bit better, one country at a time, make sure you subscribe to Notebook Summaries and check out the full Quick Country Histories playlist. Thanks so much for watching.